G'day folks, welcome to this playthrough of Introductory Scenario 5, Day of the Tiger from The Greatest Day by MMP, part of Adam Starkweather's Green Tactical series. This is actually a relatively fast-playing scenario. There are only a handful of counters on a pretty large map. It is in many ways sort of a scaled-up version of that learning scenario, the Black Baron, which I played through earlier. It uses a large map, a handful of counters, runs through 4 turns, but there's only 5 chits in the cup. So it's pretty easy to play. It's actually, having played through this, it serves as a pretty good introductory scenario. Well, that was number 5. It could well serve as the first introduction to the game for new players. Let's see how it plays through. Okay, well, here's the setup for the start of the scenario. The map begins completely blank. What happens is the 7th Armoured Division is the chit that we start with, and these allied units begin to roll onto the map one at a time in column. They are trying to capture and hold, I think it's hill 213 over here, so you can see the path they have to take through sort of via Villas Bocage. When they pass through Villas Bocage, they're subject to an ambush attack. It's a 3 red attack with no modifiers, and its results are implemented immediately. The unit has to activate in one of these hexes. Moving through the hex does not cause an attack. They have sort of movement ranges from 18 down to 4. Yep. Actually, that is mechanized. Mechanized. They can load up in their trucks for 18, so they can move pretty quickly. But Wittmann and 2 of his units, which I'll show you up here, they can activate, and not just activate, but magically appear in any hex not occupied by allied units when the either the 12th SS or the German Direct Command chit is drawn. When either those chits are drawn, this happens. These 2 units, big tiger units, magically appear on the map and start attacking those 7th Armoured Division. This is sort of a bigger scale recreation of that initial learning scenario, the Black Baron. You may recall the first video I did in this months ago, where it was just sort of a 1 square map of this area, and Wittmann activated and destroyed the Allied armour. In this case, we have a much bigger map, much more scale for the Allies to reconsider their route, and to sort of play through the consequences, the aftermath of that battle. This actually runs for several turns, 7, 9, 1100 and 1300, so 4 turns. There are very few activation markers in the cup. It just plays out over the course of several hours. Alright, let's get this 7th Armoured Division on the board, and we'll see how this plays out. Okay, so we've just had the 7th Armoured Division activation. I'll show you what's happened. So our recon unit raced out in front to quickly seize Hill 213, and they were accompanied by another armoured unit in the wooded terrain of Villas Bocage, just sort of on the top of that hill there. The idea is the recce holds the vital point, protected hopefully by some armoured units. The secondary objective for the 7th Armoured is to occupy 4 hexes of Villas Bocage. So they've moved a few armoured units in here as well, and they've tried to position them alongside this ridge, which will sort of enable them to fire over the ridge whilst holding those key areas. They were ambushed on the way. You can see a couple of cohesion hits, couple of lucky shots by the Germans as those allied units move through. they now hold, I believe, 5 of those hexes. Now the infantry moved as far up as they could and then dismounted, whilst they had movement points remaining to do so. So they moved up here. I think they exhausted half their movement, and they dismounted, and they're on foot here, and they'll then walk into Villers-Bocage and follow up from the armoured units. We then had their flanks protected by an armoured unit up here, armoured unit down here, anti-tank guns. I should have moved them up further into more open terrain, but there we go. And armoured units, just an armoured company at their rear. So I'm trying to protect the infantry in the centre, armoured mainly at the front here. That's their movement. The second counter drawn was the 12th SS Panzer divisional activation. Now when this happens, or the Germans can decide to wait, but I'm not going to. When this happens, Wittmann and his 2 Tiger companies appear anywhere on the map not occupied by an Allied unit. And there's a lot of choices here. He could appear right next to the infantry here and start blasting away at the infantry. He could appear effectively in Villers-Bocage and start hitting these units, but the primary objective of the Allies is to hold this height, and so Wittmann is going to appear right here. So what's happened effectively is the Allies have rushed up the hill, they've crossed the ridge, they've moved through the forest, and as they get through these roads, they realise that Wittmann is waiting for them on the other side, right in very close proximity. He will get a possibly, well, I haven't decided what to do with him yet. He may fire at close range, he may assault because he's directly adjacent to these 2 areas, and there's a recce unit with a pretty low fire rating, relatively low troop value, certainly compared to these Tigers, holding that point. Now, I think I'm going to also put, and he's going to be in column. Or should I fire first? So he needs to be in column to assault. I'm just wondering if I should fire first, try to soften up that target. That'll be a pretty easy target. I might even hit them straight away. Look, -1 modifier is not going to do too much, so they'll go into column with Wittmann. Now, we also have to place this slightly stronger Tiger company, and again, they can go anywhere the Allies don't occupy, right at the end, around the flanks, right next to the infantry. Best, I think, to keep them close to Wittmann's command, which is a relatively low range, and they have a few options. They could certainly be placed somewhere around here or here and fire upon Villers-Bocage and slot just across the ridge into these units here. They could potentially come down here and start firing from here, but I think I'd like to have them very close to Wittmann just to follow up if needed. And I'm thinking of this space here. This enables them to fire on Hill 213, to assault Hill 213. I'm putting them in column. Again, it's only -1 modifier to their fire rating of 8. If they pass their troop company bonus, they'll be firing at a 9 or less anyway, with a 9 missing, but anything less succeeding. They also have line of sight, I think, maybe to this unit here. They can follow up, move along through the roads, and threaten Villers-Bocage once they've done their first action on leadership draw. So this is the plan. Really, just the Germans focus on Hill 213, take that primary objective away from the Allies, and then see what happens afterwards. We've got 4 turns to see what happens. That is all that. These are the only units that come out at this 0700 turn. So all units are on the map. It's now just down to the activations, starting with Wittmann, his 4 activations, and that other Tiger unit. Okay, here's the situation at the end of the first turn. Now, Wittmann, of course, had his 4 activations and just decided to fire directly on the Allied units with great success. He scored I think an elimination hit on that recon unit, the Stuart tanks, wiping them out, and then scored, I think, a cohesion hit on
they might be Cromwell tanks. One cohesion hit. Then this other armoured unit spent its second action to move up. And then the German direct command ship came out, and Wittmann spent, or his armoured unit spent, a command to fire, which caused a second hit on this unit. The other shot, caused no effect. So this armoured unit is down to one step, 2 cohesion hits, almost wiped out. Finally, the Allies drew their direct command ship to end the turn, and they've spent a few command points to bring up a lot of their armour. You can see anti-tank here. They're bringing some units up through the woods to the south. They've looped a unit around, coming back behind Wittmann. Wittmann got 2 shots off, opportunity fire, as this unit comes out of the woods, because they have a range of 5, these Tigers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So as they come out, they're fired on. And then they came out of column and were fired on again. So 2 more cohesion hits on that unit. But basically, the Allies need to recapture Hill 2, 1, 3, or they lose this scenario. So there's no point sitting back in Villers-Bocage. They need to move up. It is costly. It does cost them command points, but they want to be in a position to do something in this coming turn, just in case that 7th Armoured Division activation comes out straight away. So that's the end of the first turn. The Germans hold Hill 2, 1, 3, but the Allies are not going to sit back. They are going to counterattack and make a fight of it. Let's see what happens. Well, unfortunately, the Allies didn't put up much of a fight. Now, the next 2 turns played through very quickly, so I didn't do an end-of-turn summary. Things rapidly deteriorated for the Allies. They tried to sort of surround Wittmann on that hill. Now, Wittmann, first of all, cleared off that other Cromwell company on the hill, occupied the 2 wooded terrains on the hill between the crests, just sort of northeast of Villers-Bocage. As this is a very strong defensive position for a number of reasons. You can see from these images that those Tiger companies remained in column throughout the rest of this scenario, just because they had such strong defense. They get the defensive, modifier for being Tigers, which is like a -5. They get the -2, I think, for the woods. And they get a -2 for any units firing across those ridge lines. At the same time, they have outstanding troop quality of 7 or 8, and they have a fire value before modifiers of 8. So what was happening throughout these turns is, as the Allies tried to move in. The other thing is these Tigers have a range of 5, whereas the Allied tanks have a range of 4 or 3. So the Allies have to get close enough to these Tigers to shoot at them. And you can see in the sort of southeast of Point Hill 213, the Allies have tried to move through these towns to the southeast. These went on a wide outflanking manoeuvre just to avoid the line of sight of Wittmann's Tigers. And then they emerged from these towns in the southeast. But whenever they did so, whenever they came into the line of sight of these Tigers, they suffered devastating opportunity fire. Again, these Tigers start with this fire rating of 8, and then the modifier for opportunity fire. There's a lot of open terrain in this area, even with those sort of the ridgeline penalties and other terrain penalties in the armour. Wittmann was, and these Tigers were causing some elimination hits on some of these units. At the same time, whenever the Allies tried to counterfire on Wittmann, they needed effectively a 0 to hit. So again, -5 for these Tigers, -2 for the woods, -2 when this fire is going across a ridgeline. It's a -9 modifier to whatever they roll. So effectively they need a 0 to hit. And they did not roll a single 0 on any of the direct fire attacks throughout these turns. You can see the artillery park has been set up, but didn't get opportunity to do much. And so, the second and the third turn ran through very quickly. By this stage,
by the end of the third turn, the Allies had lost the bulk of their armoured units. And it was really at this point that the Allies effectively gave up. There was no point risking anything. More German reinforcements had arrived, so then had 4 armoured units on the board, and effectively, I think by this stage they had outnumbered Allied armour. Still had that Allied infantry in Villers Bocage, and they could have moved up to try and, I guess, I don't know what they could have done, assault, some direct fire against Wittmann, but again, this is a very strong defensive position. Those Tigers are in a great position. Again, with 4 German armoured companies on the board, I didn't think they stood much of a chance, so they decided to hold in Villers Bocage for the rest of the scenario. And Wittmann was quite happy on point 213. It's a great defensive position up there, and didn't need to press any further. So another German victory. This wasn't as interesting as the other scenarios I played. It's, as I said earlier, it was almost a repeat of the Black Baron, but on a larger scale and with slightly more units. But I just could not do anything against these Tigers. Did not score a single cohesion hit. Did not get close to doing so. The 12th SS Panzer Division had a lot of command points up their sleeves where the Allies were running very low as they kept trying to do additional secondary actions and fire actions and so forth. It was basically just a fire exchange, and the German tanks won out in that. That's all there was to the story, pretty much. It's Day of the Tiger, which took place on the 13th of June, 1944.